Okay, welcome everybody. This is the meeting of February 21st, 2017 of the Transportation Advisory Committee, and it's called to order. Lisa, would you call the roll, please?
It's Mr. Anderson,
Here.
Mr. Batty,
Here.
Mr. Jessic, Mr. LaSalle,
Here.
Mr. McEnroe,
Here.
Mr. Johnson,
Here.
Mr. Mahoney.
Here.
Okay. Approval of the minutes of November 15th, 2016. Does anybody have any corrections, additions to those minutes?
I move the minutes stand as written.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the minutes. Everybody in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Approved. Agenda analysis. Does anybody have anything that they want to add to the agenda or change on the agenda? Nobody. Okay. Citizen comments. Do we have any citizen comments this evening? Does anybody want to address us? Okay for you. You got your chance. New business discussion items 5A, Oregon City Trail Alliance bike rack design.
Do we, Joe, do you mind if we let the Oregon City Police Department talk to us first?
No, not at all.
If you mind, you might be in trouble, though.
Of course not.
I know you guys wanted to come in and share.
Come on up.
Sean, are you going to lead the show here? All right.
First of all, any one of us look familiar to you?
No, just the names.
I haven't signed anything or anything, so.
I'm Captain Sean Davis, and we now have a traffic team that's formed up with 3 officers, and one works day shift, one works swing shift, 2 work swing shift, and one's in jail right now. But I wanted to introduce Mike Galante. He's our newest officer. He retired from Portland. He was just sworn in a couple months ago. So we wanted to come and introduce our traffic team. Unfortunately, only one's here, but we wanted to provide information or be a resource for you guys, and that's why we're here today.
Is the retired Oregon State policeman still on your team?
No, he's not.
Oh, okay.
What, was it Michael Galante? Oh, Velante.
Well,
He brings a lot of knowledge and information from Portland. 20 years? 20
years in the traffic division. I retired after 25.
So he's got a lot of wealth and knowledge with traffic, and he's already pointing out some stuff that he's noticing or that we maybe need to address, or some different signage and stuff like that. So
are the laws and whatnot pretty similar between the 2 cities?
The laws are similar. I'm just noticing where we're getting a lot of our crashes and some congested areas, and I'm curious to see what you folks have thought about those areas. And I'm sure you've milled through a lot of them, but between me and the other guys, we're looking at a few things that might be helpful, like 14th and Main, and a couple other areas where we end up going quite a bit to crashes or conflicts with vehicles and whatnot.
We've discussed the 12th and Washington intersection several times on this committee over the years.
And I'm noticing that U-turns are in traffic in middle of the block, in intersections, at the library, coming out of a parking lot stall, are growing in frequency.
We were just talking about that yesterday with Officer Fitzer, the other traffic officer, that we're seeing a lot of them down there McLaughlin and Dunes at that signal. And I don't know if they're trying to shortcut the line to get onto the freeway.
There's
closer to the microphone. Sure.
There is quite a bit of shortcutting trying to get around the signals on McLaughlin to get onto 205, especially westbound from south on McLaughlin, from Gladstone to westbound onto 205 and into the shopping center at Oregon City Shopping Center also. Because about the only way you can get into that is in that line.
Well, I think the captain's hope is that I would be a resource for you folks if you have an area that you're looking at, that I could go out there and take a look at it and work the area. And if I see something or some signage that might be helpful, then I can let you know through him and whatnot. It's just kind of be a resource back and forth. And I'm sure I'll have a lot to learn from what you've seen here already.
So you introduced as traffic officers. Does that mean you're going to spend more time enforcing traffic or analyzing issues like you're just talking about?
Well, when they brought me here just briefly, they told me that our crashes here were the same as Ben and we're a third the size. And they also told me that the population triples during the day with all the commuters coming to and fro. And so my concentration since I've been here the last 3 or 4 months is just to look at those thoroughfares and see how those commuters are impacting the safety of the citizens and the structure that we have, because we can't really change much about the infrastructure, but maybe we can change some driving habits. So I've been part of the evaluation, as far as I see it, is going out and stopping folks for traffic violations and then being present in areas where we're having a lot of conflicts to try to minimize the amount of crashes that we have. Because everybody knows when we get one crash and we're dealing with that, we tend to have a couple more happen. And so just to try to minimize those. And then the captain's keeping stats on where we're working and where those crashes are happening and how that works together to try to make it better.
And unfortunately, ODOT stats, as you know, the most recent are 2014, so we're going off of those. But we're trying to figure out where we're having them on a daily basis now in 2017 and trying to address those. And then seeing, obviously, how we can change the driving behavior. Education is a big thing for us. We do a lot of education and not just citing people too. Teach a lot of classes, at driver's ed and some diversion classes. So
You have a radar car?
Right now, I'm on the low end of the seniority list, so I have the older car, a marked car with a radar unit, but we're in the process of outfitting 3 cars that will be working full-time traffic.
this is the first time since probably I've been here that we've had 3 traffic cars. When I first got hired in '98, we had quite a few traffic cars, and then that kind of tapered off. And then intermittently, we've had 1 or 2. So this is the first time that we've had 3 people since probably the '90s.
Would it be appropriate to sort of ask, is 3 per capita in our size city above, below, or reasonably normal for density?
Well, we're trying to cover as many shifts as we can. So like one of our officers works 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. The other one works 9 p.m. to 7 p.m. And then Michael works noon to 10 p.m. So we've kind of analyzed where the crashes, what times they're occurring, and we're trying to cover as many as we can. So some agencies, larger agencies, Portland had how many traffic cars? Obviously, quite a bit.
Yeah, when it's dwindled down considerably as the years have gone on, just because of staffing. But when I left, I think we had 40 full-time traffic folks. The other aspect of the traffic enforcement part is, for example, if we get a DUI crash, that would actually tie up our patrol officers, and probably all of them. And we have the experience to go in there and take that crash off of them, which is what I did in Portland. We would process all the DUIs and the crashes, and so it would free up patrol to answer calls. And so we're not just doing writing tickets or enforcement, we're actually subsidizing the patrol function.
So when you say staffing, you're really saying funding.
I think that's what everybody says when they say staffing. You're right about that. Yes,
It's really funny. It boils down to financing the operation.
Right.
And just from a layperson that keeps his eye out.
Well, we've had for years.
It seems to me that 3 is way beyond what you guys need. You probably need about 10.
Yeah, there at times we could definitely use more.
Yeah.
But we've noticed right now the biggest tickets that are coming through are people on cell phones, distracted driving, following too closely. That kind of stuff is what's causing the crashes. So their main focus is speed and distracted driving, and that's what they're really trying to educate the public, but also enforce. And we'll try and see if those stats or traffic crashes go down. because of that enforcement.
Is that distracted driving amongst the younger generation, or
It's
is
everyone.
is it everyone?
Kind of runs the
You'd
gamut.
think they'd know. You know, you're talking about cell phones, aren't you?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I mean, people will be sitting there driving down the road checking Facebook because we're such a technology-driven society now that they're putting not only themselves at risk but innocent people around them. So we're trying to really get the education out there about that.
Well, mine is the purplish Ford Fusion out there with fuzzy dice and retired U.S. Army decal on the back, so you can just.
If you keep the Band-Aid there, sir, I'll be sure to remember you.
Right, you're right.
So our traffic officers are going to try and show up at every meeting just to be a resource for you guys and pass information back and forth. And we now have a team to be able to do that. So.
Yeah, could I ask you a question too? Several months ago, there was a member of the police department who worked patrol, and he said all the officers on patrol had a quota of 10 traffic citations per month. So members of the traffic division have a higher quota.
No, there's no quota anymore. There's patrol is now focusing on patrol. Traffic is now focusing on traffic. So sometimes they only write a couple tickets. Sometimes they're writing quite a few tickets, and it's all trying to change the driving behavior of the people that they stop. So
I think at the time there was nobody working on just the traffic division.
yeah, there was no one, and so our patrol guys were also trying to take 911 calls, all calls for service, and still trying to do all the traffic stuff, which is kind of relieve them from they're still doing traffic enforcement when they see it and they're driving around, but that's not their primary focus anymore. We have now a division that's doing that of 3 officers.
So Sean, I missed if you said them. What are the names of the other 2 officers?
So Officer Brian Willard, and he's been on the team since about 2013. We've used him for staffing too, so I'm pretty sure it was about 2013 when he became in like September. And he works the day shift. And then John Fetzer, and he works the 9 to 7 p.m.
And
One
then-
other question. When you stop somebody because of a traffic violation, it can very quickly turn out to be something other than a traffic stop, can it not? I mean, you don't know who's behind that wheel and what their state of mind is. So your profile all of a sudden goes from traffic stop to something else. And when you pull somebody over, other people at dispatch or whatever know that you've pulled a certain car over. They're aware of what's going on in the field. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, yeah. So you're wearing more than one hat in terms of traffic, potentially.
Yeah, absolutely. Someone may have just committed a crime and we have no idea.
Yeah, that's
and we're
fine,
just
yeah.
stopping them for a normal traffic violation, and it could go easy or it could go. I mean, you hear stories all across the United States of officers getting injured or hurt or killed just because of, a Whittier police officer this weekend was killed just on a traffic crash. So it could happen quite easily.
So I just wanted to make sure we're reaching out to you. So when it comes to resources for mapping, if you're trying to figure out where signs make most sense or if it's a ride along, you probably haven't, maybe you've met Martin already, but we've also got a street supervisor who deals with any of the signage. It doesn't necessarily have to come through this committee. So things like, man, we really ought to put a speed zone sign closer to the highway or something like that as opposed to where it's at now. Those kind of things don't take a lot of process for us as long as we're not adding a lot of signs that are, kind of tapping the budget more than we'd planned, but we've definitely got that. And anything with regard to mapping, we can produce those if you want, hard copy maps just to mark things up. And so definitely offer that. We're a big partner in wanting to get this right. And then the other thing I'd say is this committee does get a lot of folks walking in that are really, the last one, we've had Center Street's been one that's been pretty heavily, High Street, and then Fifth or Lynn Avenue going up. Those have been kind of some hotbed for speeding complaints, and so these guys usually have to kind of hear it, and unless it's a signing problem, where we've missigned it. But things like usually they don't like the posted speed and they want us to change the posted speed. So validation of some of that was one thing that was pretty helpful with the last officer that was here that spoke. He was able to categorize, I think everybody feels like their city's just a hotbed for speeding when in reality, it's not necessarily that bad. So having that validation helps too, because people are especially if they're, if they live 20 feet off the street or something, they're sitting on their front porch, everything feels fast at that vantage point. So having somebody to validate that's not Martin and I, that's in a uniform, I think that means a lot, especially if they're dedicated to traffic enforcement. So we do appreciate having somebody here.
We have, if you guys get complaints, there's on our website and the city's website, if there's specifically just for traffic enforcement complaints, it goes right to these guys, and then they contact that person. So, and then go out there and see what kind of complaint it is and analyze it and take enforcement action if they need to, and then follow up with that person. So if you guys get complaints or questions about, they can refer them to the police department, and we're more than happy to go out there and check it out and contact them.
That's great.
Anybody else have any questions? Okay. Thanks for keeping us safe.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Your turn.
Mike. Joe Merrick. We met over the phone last week. Oh, that's right. Good to meet you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Okay, to remind everybody, this is a presentation on the Oregon City Trail Alliance design.
The controller of the slides.
I'll hand it to you, and I'll get that going, so you should be able to control it yourself.
You guys have a screen that you see? Even more excellent.
Except we can't see the pointer.
Oh, good point. Okay, my name is, do you need my address or just my name?
Just your city.
City. Oh, my name is Joseph Merrick. I live in Oregon City, and I am the president of Oregon City Trail Alliance, and I'm here tonight to talk about a bicycle rack proposal. So thank you for having me. So a little bit of history about the Oregon City Trail Alliance. We were formed in 2012, and our main mission is to really advocate for better walking and cycling in and around Oregon City, and to support developing, maintaining, and promoting a network system of trails to facilitate those non-motorized modes of walking and cycling, which of course helps as part of that environmental stewardship and economic vibrancy for the community. We have been working on a bicycle rack project through a grant that was awarded through Oregon City and Metro Enhancement Grant. And the idea was to design and install artistic functional bike racks. We've been working with the city over the course of this grant, as well as community partners, which I'll bring up, to both design and determine some locations for bike racks. And as part of the pilot project is to really show the need for cycling and provide those opportunities for people who are coming to the city. As you can imagine, there are a variety of different bike rack designs, some very artsy, some very fascinating, some very non-functional. And one of the things that this group was really interested in was developing a bike rack that was specific for Oregon City. In the case, we settled on celebrating the Arch Bridge and having a bicycle rack that was really very unique, but also very functional. After all, that's what it's for. So we've been working with a company out of Minnesota on a design, and we gave them this concept of incorporating the Arch Bridge as part of the bike rack. The rack itself is a very conventional staple style bike rack that you see all over the region. And we've added this enhancement of a laser cut depiction of the Oregon City Arch Bridge. One of the things we've been talking with them about is round versus square tubing, and the reason I'm bringing this up is we've been also talking with city staff about the potential of developing this design as a city standard, because the city has no real bicycle rack standard. So one of the things I had been talking with the vendor about was square tubing versus round tubing. I just happened to be looking around on the internet and saw this picture from Bike Portland where this round tubing was cut with a pipe cutter, which you can do, I guess, quickly and quietly, versus square tubing, which is a little more difficult to do because you actually have to take a saw on something that makes noise to cut that rack. And so it's just a little piece as I'm learning about bicycle rack design was a fascinating component. So what we're looking for is possible action from this group in terms of endorsing this concept or this proposal as something that could be incorporated as a future standard for Oregon City as their standard bike rack design. So when a developer comes in and you have a development requirement for them to put in a bike rack, that they would have put in a bike rack meeting these particular specifications. As part of the grant that we've been working on, we've been doing outreach within the community. We've actually presented this design to the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association, who actually like the design enough that they're getting a list of about 50 locations where they'd like to put these racks. Also, we've gotten endorsement of Barkley Hills Neighborhood Association, and Shelley Beatty, who's helping out with this, has also gotten a verbal endorsement from the Chamber of Commerce. And as during the grant application process, we had identified a number of locations that we had outreach to those folks, some of who wrote support letters for the proposed grant when we were initially developing it. And so that includes the Pioneer Senior Center, the Singer Hill Cafe, First City Cycles, Oregon City Brewing, Museum of the Oregon Territory, 505 Bar and Grill, the OC Train Depot, and First City Central Bistro, Oregon City Parks Foundation. And so also, as I noted before, we've been working with Oregon City staff on this idea of maybe making this a bike standard. And as far as the grant part of it goes, the Trail Alliance is moving ahead. And so once we settle on a design and the city's okay with it, we'll be purchasing those racks and going through the permitting process with the city. And at this point, assuming there's certain criteria that's met, the city staff will hopefully be able to help us with the installation of those racks, at least as a starting point. But the primary reason I'm here tonight was to put this concept out, this potential rack design, to see if this group was interested in endorsing the concept of this eventually becoming a city standard. So that's all I have for tonight, so I'm certainly happy to answer questions. Thank you.
I actually have a question that would be more for staff, I think, and that is that because I live next to a similar installation for a bus bench that was put in 45 years ago and hasn't been maintained since, who's going to be responsible for doing the maintenance and such on these racks? And is it going to be a city requirement that the property owners maintain it? Is it going to be a city-maintained item? That's the general drift of where I'm headed with it.
I generally think that the bike racks and chairs and garbage cans are the city's, they're furnishings that the city will need to maintain if they're in the public right of way, not necessarily on private property.
Right.
But it's been a little different with some of those older TriMet facilities, and the other problem we've had is some sponsored benches that just have shown up, in the public right of way, especially with, we've changed our plans on that. But yeah, this seems to me like that's one of the reasons why it's important that we agree on the makeup of the facility and have it as a standard. And so yeah, we'll taking that on, and we do so now. They typically don't require much for maintenance.
Right.
So how many bicycles would you have on a rack like we saw on the presentation here?
How many bicycles can you attach to it?
Yeah.
Usually at least two. If it's like a group ride, they may stack the bikes up against each other. You could probably lock up 4 or 5.
Now, how would they be located? For example, I saw on the list the Singer Hill Cafe and the 505 Tavern. You wouldn't want them right on the curb edge, would you?
Now, what we'll do when we're get to that point is we'll actually look at a location that's, if we can, that's an open space between where the parallel parking is, and then you want enough distance on each side of the rack to get the bikes in there. And then whatever design we have, we'll be preparing that and actually submitting that to the city to make sure from the city perspective that that it works okay. And I know Martin and I have had several conversations about the best place to put the racks. So I'm envisioning that we'd be working pretty closely with city staff, because clearly we want the racks to work with where the city wants them, as well as be functional. And so I think in many cases there's ways to shift them around to make sure they work for all the different people, whether it's the cyclists or the business owners or somebody trying to get out of their car, if it's down on Main Street.
Well, any other questions?
Yeah, when you locate a rack, say within the right of way, within a sidewalk, do you check to make sure that there's still wheelchair accessibility with, if there's a bicycle attached to it?
Yes. Yes, actually, well, checking that. Another thing that's really important is making sure that that sidewalk is of sufficient structural integrity that you can actually put those screws in to attach the rack. And so there'll be a number of factors. And again, we'll be working really closely with the city on those different locations. Because again, we want this to work well for all of the parties involved. And I'm an engineer also, a transportation engineer, so I've got a pretty good sense as well in terms of dealing with that type of infrastructure.
Sure, I'll offer a motion. We support the design of the bike rack as presented.
I'll second that.
Any recommendation on square versus round?
I heard his discussion. He can make the decision. It sounds like square makes.
It's just going to impact the number that they can do within the initial grant cycle. So I'd be supportive of the square tubing.
Are we?
I'm supportive of the square tubing myself.
Okay.
So.
What's the cost difference?
The square tubing was actually less expensive than the round tubing.
Well, let's go for it. As an old steam fitter, I know how easy a pipe cutter is to use.
So I'll accept that as a friendly motion that we go with the square.
I'm not really, I wasn't expecting us to go there with that question. Joe and I have talked about the round, and my preference is round for for long-term maintenance reasons. I hadn't thought about cutting, but how about we just live with your motion and we work on the design?
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the going forward with the design
The design concept.
Okay, everybody in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, it's approved.
Aye.
You've got our
Mr.
endorsement.
Chairman, I need to abstain.
Oh, okay.
Conflict of interest here.
I understand that, yeah, okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, we can continue that conversation of round versus square. It was news to me as well.
Give him one of those mini pipe cutter things and invite him to cut a piece of pipe. It might change his mind.
Well, I have a small one at home that I've actually used, and I didn't think of it. It actually does go pretty quick, and it is really quiet.
Yeah, it takes about
How many
20
bikes have you
seconds to
stolen
get
with it?
through one.
One of those is about that.
Look at my garage. Thank you.
Okay, the next item is item 5A, Oregon City Trail Alliance,
B.
5B, Willamette Falls Legacy Project, Riverwalk Design Concepts, Kelly Reed. Hello, Kelly.
Thank you, Chair LaSalle. Thank you for having me here tonight. Lisa, do you mind making that full screen?
Kelly, can you speak into the mic a little more, please?
Okay, what am I doing wrong?
View
There we go. Yeah,
full screen mode.
there we go.
Thanks. Hey, I'm Kelly Reed. I'm here from the Development Department. I'm a planner. Been with Oregon City for about 4 years now, and I'm here to have what we're calling community conversations with you about the Riverwalk, which is part of the Willamette Falls Legacy Project. So first, since I know a lot of you are familiar with this project, I just want to see a show of hands. Who's already seen this presentation?
Well,
Just
we've seen lots of presentations. Is it
I
the same
know,
one?
right. So this one we've been giving since December.
I haven't seen it
All right.
since December.
And then, did anyone attend the open house that we held in November at the community college?
I did, and I cracked a rib
Did you
coming out of your meeting. Thank you very much.
Sorry.
Actually, his wife got mad at him. He was home late. Yeah, he was home late.
Okay. Well, we have updates on Riverwalk design tonight, but transportation is also an issue with this project that we're working on. So I'll try and talk a little bit about that as well. But do know that we have a consultant team on board that's working right now to prepare for a series of meetings that we're going to have this spring about transportation and parking for the project. So that is coming up. The first meeting will be at the end of March or early April. And we'll share that with you as soon as we have those dates set. So first I'll start with the 4 core values. Just a reminder, this project in 2012 established 4 core values to kind of guide the whole future of the project, which are public access, healthy habitat, historic and cultural interpretation, and economic redevelopment. And we, 2 years ago, adopted a framework plan to guide the future redevelopment of the site. The framework plan includes space for private development, open space, and a riverwalk. And so subsequent to that, we hired a design team through a big procurement process along with Metro, Clackamas County, and the state as our partners. And this design team started working about a year ago, and we held our first big outreach event in March of last year, and that's what these photos are from, and then also from the First City Celebration in July. So we've done a lot of public outreach thus far, and then we held this event in November as well, and now we're doing these community conversations. We're also engaging with 5 tribes that have historic and current ties to the falls. From time immemorial, people were here at Willamette Falls harvesting lamprey and fish and gathering here, and we are very seriously engaging with those tribes to make sure that their interests are respected and protected with any plans that we make. We've identified 9 key uses that will be part of the Riverwalk. Some of them are quite obvious, like falls viewing access and paths, walkways, and biking trails. But then others, we want to specifically call those out because, you wouldn't always have these as part of a Riverwalk. And those are collective gathering spaces, event spaces, access down to the river, historic reuse and cultural interpretation, and even PGE dam operations. There's an operating dam out there, and our design will have to accommodate the needs that PGE has. We've also developed a calendar that tries to depict all of the different activity that occurs on site over the year. So start with January to December, and I don't think you guys can see if I use this. Only a few of us can see it, but we're going across time. We've got different activities up there. The blue line you see is the water flow over the falls in 2015, I believe. And then what we've added to that are fish schedules of fish migration, other wildlife presence, bird migration, and then PGE dam operations. And so as we learn more and as we hear more, we'll be adding to this calendar. We're also looking at flooding and kind of how the river flow impacts redevelopment of this site. CH2M Hill has developed a hydraulic model for us. The arrows represent the velocity, I believe, and then the colors represent the depth of the water there. And so what we're able to do is test these different flood events. So in a 100-year flood event, what happens? We're looking at aerial photographs from the 96 flood to see which areas were flooded, how deep. And as we remove structures from the floodplain, we can see what happens and how this changes. We're designing different habitat types into the site that exist, and we're kind of bringing back habitat that used to exist there. And there's 6 habitat types that we're designing for and planning for. And we've done an inventory of all the buildings on site. In the framework plan, 5 of them were identified for reuse. You might see more than that eventually reused on the site, but we've kind of identified which ones need to go in order for this Riverwalk to be built. And now for the design alternatives. But first, we always want to remind ourselves, I'm just going to skip this one because sorry, this is out of the order I'm used to. This was our event in November. We had about 500 people show up, and then we posted a survey online. It's still online for the next 3 days, so if you haven't taken it, you can go on our website, rediscoverthefalls.com, and take that survey. But in the first couple of weeks of the survey, we had 1,200 people take it, and so I have some results from that to share with you as we talk about the different design alternatives. In order to kind of break the site up into little pieces and more easily tackle design, we've divided it into these 4 sections. So I'll focus on each one. The Kanema connection is area 4 up there. We don't have anything in this presentation that's going to show that Kanema connection, but I can tell you what we are looking at is potentially a trail that would connect down to the neighborhood, go over the railroad tracks, connect into Kanema, and or a trail that just kind of dead ends and has a portage location so that if you're in a canoe or kayak and you're coming down the river, you can get out above the falls and then travel through the site and then put back in below the falls. And so this shows where we were in November. And at that point, we still had a lot of homework to do. And so right now, we're still doing some of that homework. And we will have some updates to share with you in March and a few more questions to ask. So that survey that's on our website now is going to be replaced with another update and survey. So we're going to ask you for more input then. But what we've been asking about is these 6 kind of key aspects of the waterfront design. And we also always want to remind ourselves and everybody else that the Riverwalk is more than a walk. Traditionally, Riverwalk is a path between the river and buildings on Main Street. But really, we're looking at a different definition of a Riverwalk that really spreads out and connects Main Street to the river. And in the same sense, we're looking at it as a kind of a 3-dimensional Riverwalk as well, to get down to the water and then up above to see views up and down the river. Okay, so looking at the North Riverfront area, we've got explorer trails, which are shown those white lines. They won't be white probably, but that's just so they pop out and you can see them in the drawing. And then we're looking at water access in this area. And I will tell you that we asked about, kayaking access and motorized boat access here. But what we've learned since November is that the area over to the right side of your screen with the diagonal line cut through it. That's in another area of the site that we'll talk about, but we learned that that's actually a better place for kayak access. So we heard strongly that people want that, but right now we're probably not going to be providing it where that number 2 is labeled. It would most likely be in the other section. These are existing conditions, lots of industrial structures along the waterfront. And we presented 3 options. This first one is just habitat restoration and a place for people to observe, maybe fish from that location, but not actually access the water. The second one was a kayak launch in a gathering space. And then the third one was an actual boat dock for motorized boats. And there was support for all 3 of these, but the highest level of support in the survey and at the event was this kayaking launch and gathering space.
Would that be option 2?
Yeah, the one that's got the orange box around it.
And that kayaking, paddle boarding is big now, so that would work there as well.
Absolutely.
And canoes.
Any non-motorized watercraft. When I say kayaking, I mean all of those things.
Are you essentially including recreational type stuff? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
What consideration have you given to tourism via boats from Portland? Because I know the big ones are going to be bringing people up, because it's there. The river's there. So why not? What is it? Spirit of Portland?
Yeah. We talked with Portland Spirit. We talked with Willamette Jet Boat about potentially having a landing somewhere on the site. Basically, the water, the river in this area is very turbulent and treacherous, and it's too close to the falls really to get any sort of commercial boat access. Now, where we might be able to eventually get commercial boat access is above the falls in the intake basin, and I'll show you that later. But that's still something that may be on the table. But below the falls, what we've looked at, it's just not possible.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And then we also asked people in the survey and at the event to look at these precedent images and examples of different trails and tell us what sort of feel and experience and material they'd like to have as part of the river walk. And we heard, anything that had green vegetation in it was more popular than the kind of stark, dry-looking photos. And then natural materials as well. And in a lot of the sensitive habitat areas, we're thinking that these walkways will have to be elevated. So this picture with the elevated walkway is maybe something similar to what you might see on site. And I'm going to go back just very quickly to this slide. I know I can put the little hand here for you guys to see. Can you see that? So it's resting on that kind of gray path, and there, I can get it on there again. That would be a major promenade along the waterfront, and then the Explorer trails would just be secondary trails. So we'd have this big, nice promenade with Explorer trails. And this area as well is looking at removing some buildings to expose that old tail race that you see is that little waterway coming out into the Willamette.
I have a question on the trails. Mm-hmm. Have you been in contact with State Parks trail people?
They're on our team, yeah.
Have they been involved in this a little bit?
Yeah, we have people from State Parks. What specifically?
Well, I'm thinking that the beach trails that the parks has are similar in character to this, and there might be some carryover that might be possible from what they've learned over the 30 or 40 years that they've been dealing with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we do have Dennis Wiley with State Parks on our team, so we can make sure we ask him specifically about that. That's a good point. Because, some of these trails are going to be built in areas that flood. So they will be inundated probably at times.
They have quite a few elevated trails too.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for asking a question, because I am going to take notes. So any opinions that you share or questions, we're taking all those down and then sharing them with our design team. So we definitely want to hear what you think about all these ideas. Mm-hmm.
So as I've listened to this, I'm wondering if, you have a lot of grant money, a lot of partners financing the front end. Are you doing cost-benefit analysis or operational analysis so that, in 10 years or 20 years, you can maintain this thing if it's built?
Yeah, that's a big part of it. We don't know yet who will operate and maintain the Riverwalk. We're still having those conversations. Could be Oregon City. It could be a partnership of Oregon City with some of these other government partners that we have. It could be a nonprofit entity that doesn't even exist right now. So, that's a really something that we're going to figure out soon. And then what the budget is for maintenance and operations as well hasn't been determined. But we have Phil Lewis, our new parks director with Oregon City, is been heavily involved in this, and so we're relying on him and some of our staff at Metro that know a lot about maintenance and operations, so that they can advise us what is maybe not a good idea, this material or that material that is expensive to maintain, or something that we can flag that.
Just like had the experience where Metro went out twice for 10-year bonds to acquire land, and then they sheepishly came forward and said, "Oh, we need to have you pass an operating levy so we can maintain this stuff."
Mm-hmm.
So we should know the answer to that maintenance question up front, not
Absolutely.
the back end.
Yeah, it's something that the partners have decided is needed before we begin, before we actually begin construction and really get close to that
Okay,
needs to be figured out.
Kelly, I've got a question.
Yeah.
Along with been asked before, but trails and walking suggests that sooner or later people are going to get tired and they're going to want to sit down. Is there any rest areas along this place where you could just sit down and get your breath?
Mm-hmm. The promenade will be wide, and we'll have benches and things like that. And then the next section that I'm going to talk about is a big plaza, or what we're calling the yard. But it's a large space that will have places to sit for sure. So let me get to that next section.
And I assume you're going to talk about the handicap access aspects too.
Yes, it will be ADA. Absolutely. Take these notes.
We lose the revenue and they want us to.
Okay, so the second area is the South Riverfront. We've got 3rd Street, Old 3rd Street, which will be 3rd Street once again, flanking it. And then there are some historic buildings that kind of flank it as well. If I can use this. This is the Woolen Mill Foundation, and then let's see if I can. That building is Mill O, and those both are buildings that were selected to remain on site with the redevelopment. So those will kind of flank this big open space here, which we're calling the yard. So we're looking at removing some fill and buildings to expose the natural shoreline, and add habitat and areas that are really good for those migratory fish, and then have a place for gatherings and events in that yard. It would be a flexible space. And then this structure right here is called a pipe chase. It's over 300 feet long. It's this big concrete tunnel, basically hollow, square tunnel, but hollow, that our design team is looking at repurposing. So we have some design options about that. And just to show you the historic shoreline, this photo is from 1867. And that large building that you see there is the woolen mill. So that foundation still exists. And then if you see this alcove here, that is, the natural shoreline, that's what we're looking to expose by removing the buildings and removing the fill, so that we would once again have water kind of coming into the site there. And that's where you could also have your river access to get on your kayak or your paddleboard.
I think that's the mouth of the creek that goes through Public Works buildings, operations buildings.
It actually connects. It doesn't connect to any creek. And the water was originally brought in to power the woolen mill. And if we wanted to have water actually flowing through there, we would have to bring it in somehow, or filter storm water through there. But the river actually might come up into it as well.
Is that access to the river, as you refer to, is that going to be public or is that going to be commercial or private?
We don't know exactly how it would be set up, but we're thinking of it, I think, as public. Not a pay to play. Like all of the Riverwalk.
Yeah, because that issue's been discussed and it's kind of controversial by its very nature.
Yeah. This other section of the historic photo shows the flour mill, which is this building right here. The foundation of that is still underneath some of the existing paper mill buildings that are out there, so that's potentially something that could be exposed. And we'll have a question about that, I think, on our next survey in March. This is what it looks like today. The alcove that we saw in the last photo basically was here. And so if you see all that fill that's been brought in and then all the structure that's built on top of it, that could be removed. So we're looking to remove about at least a third of that pipe chase. So the section that we're looking at there could be removed, and then leave the remainder of it to be used as part of the walkway. And that's in the public yard. The pipe chase is kind of on the edge of it there. And then we have about 5 different options that we showed people about the pipe chase. And I'll tell you which ones were the most popular, but there's a porch option where you open it up, let people go inside, and on top of it, a bridge option where you remove the bottom half. This one's called porous, cutting holes in it to allow light to pass through down to the water. Kind of cutting it up, chopping it up, and then removing a vast majority of it to restore habitat. So we heard various levels of support for all those, but the most popular were the porous option and the porch. And so we'll probably see something in the preferred design that looks kind of similar to this, I would imagine, with a third of the pipe chase removed.
I'm wondering, you guys are making decisions, but is anybody looking also the cost?
Mm-hmm.
One may be, preferred by everybody, but may cost, $100 million.
Right. We do have preliminary cost estimates for everything, and they are pretty close to what our budget is. The full Riverwalk is hard and soft costs combined, $60 million, and we have about 20 for phase 1. So the question before us now is kind of, we have this full concept that we're going to share with you that's a $60 million project, but really what can we do in that first phase? What's that $20 million going to go towards? So that's a big question that we're grappling with now, and that we're looking at these cost estimates very closely. But everything that you see here, the cost wasn't like they weren't wildly different, so they're all fairly comparable. For the precedent images, we were asking people what sort of experience they wanted in that public yard area. So seating, art, what sort of events, what sort of materials. So you see the ones with a lot of seating were popular, and showing people, lots of people was also a popular among the popular choices. Moving on to the last section, Area 3, this is the PGE Dam, and then Mill E is this building actually that is, this thing moves very slowly. Mill E is this building, and it's actually more of an opportunity for private redevelopment. So you won't see that really as part of the Riverwalk. But we're looking at this section down here. So you'll see a path along the PGE Dam to the final falls overlook. And then the clarifier is a big concrete tank. It's very large, and it was built in around 1968 to treat all of the effluent from the paper making process. So all that effluent went in there, and it went through its cycle, cleaned the water up before it went back into the river. And today, that clarifier is empty. It's kind of a bowl, and the pipes have been cut, and it's not going to be used as a clarifier anymore. And so we're looking at ways to repurpose it or maybe remove some or all of it. We've got, first a few historic photos. So the early dam is shown here. You can see the water, that's the intake basin above the falls, and then that early dam walkway. And this boat here is kind of where you might eventually see commercial boat access in the future. And that's the woolen mill building on the right is the same building from the earlier photos. And today, the modern dam, and this is looking kind of from the viewpoint. You can see the clarifier, and then this is looking from the mill out towards the clarifier. And so, totally different perspective now. Now you're in West Lynn looking towards the site. And one option is to just totally remove the clarifier. Another one is to create an event space. That one's similar. This one is to create it is a hot air balloon. It was meant to show a non-permanent attraction that you could kind of bring in. And this, I can tell you, was not popular at all on the survey.
What about a big drone?
This is creating a giant planter with a walkway around the perimeter of the clarifier, and then this one's kind of similar, but actually bringing in more dirt to create a little hill.
A question?
Inside. Mm-hmm.
Tangent, really a tangent, but is that clarifier connected to the pipe that goes under the river to the storage ponds on the West Lynn side?
Yes, it was.
And is Tri-City still interested in hooking up to that pipe?
The West bought the ponds, and they're using those, or they have plans for those, but it has nothing to do with the pipe or the clarifier or anything.
I'd heard that they were interested in using that pipe under the river.
I'm not aware of it. Well, and it's not going to be connected to the site at least.
Yeah, but they would have to come through this general area where you're talking about the Riverwalk, with their pipe to connect to that pipe if they were going to do that.
Okay. Yeah, I think you want to check that out. We went on a tour of West facility in the town here, and I think there was some comment made about all of that. I don't know the specifics, but they had plans on it for future.
When was this?
They're running tours of the Tri-City facility, and we did this, 3 weeks ago on a Thursday morning or something like that. There was quite a few people went. It was open to the public. Quite a few people went through it.
What I know about it is, they own the pipe. There's not been any determination as to whether or not they're going to use it. They own the pipe. They have not. They've been aware of our project for a while. How they are going to get from the treatment plant to those ponds is a huge question for them. It would have some significant impacts to Oregon City if you can imagine them coming either along the existing seawall, down 99E, down Main Street, down the railroad grade, whatever route there is to get here, versus putting it on under the 205 bridge. There's an existing raceway location there, getting it, over to Willamette Drive and taking it that way. That seems like the more
At least I
logical
heard that the
location.
whole thing is going away.
I wouldn't doubt that too. Yeah, they're really kind
The
of.
environmental costs associated with that site are horrendous, and they were just looking at to offset the temperature, I think. So
Yeah, they got all the rights to the temperature.
yeah,
Yeah, so there's too many unanswered questions there, and once this site develops, they're never going to be able to get through this site.
Speaking of unanswered questions, if this Riverwalk is as successful as we hope it might be, and it looks like it will be, the elephant in the room still is parking.
Mm-hmm.
Where are we going to put the parking to accommodate people that are going to use that Riverwalk? Are we going to put them in Main Street, Oregon City, or up on the hill, or on the site?
Canby shuttle.
Pardon me?
Canby.
Canby. Okay, there you go.
And run shuttle buses.
And Canby makes all the money off the shuttle bus. But that's got to be a real big problem that you guys have mulled over in your mind.
Yeah, and I think, the answer is all of the above. We're going to need to use all the tools in the toolbox to deal with parking and access to this site. Some things that we are planning for, at least in the Riverwalk, are to make sure it's connected up to the promenade, so that people can somehow get down, maybe another elevator, from right around where the VFW is to get down to the site. So that's a pedestrian connection. Doesn't require you to get in your car and drive down to the site. Making it easy, tying it into the existing sidewalks, walkways, trails, bike lanes on Main Street. But yes, I think you'll see parking on site. You'll see potentially some use of parking up in McLaughlin and in downtown. And so we updated the downtown parking study, got new numbers on the usage of on-street parking in downtown. So we'll be sharing those this spring when we have those 3 meetings, or the series of meetings that I was talking about earlier. So we'll share that data. We looked at what capacity does downtown really have. So we'll have that information. We know that on site you can get a good amount of on-street parking, and there is potential for a parking garage on the site itself. Hopefully closer to downtown instead of closer to the falls, so that it can serve downtown as well as this property. We don't know exactly where yet that parking garage would be and at what point it would be needed.
And who's financing it?
Right, that too. This project is going to be phased over time. So, we're building the first phase in the next handful of years. And so, but final build out won't be for quite a while. So, when do we need to deploy these different tools for parking, to provide parking? So we'll be looking at all of that this spring.
Well, Kelly, it's not just tools. It's a matter of policy as well, because you're talking about this thing having an impact on the comprehensive plan of downtown Oregon City, and that's going to be a monumental task for the city to undertake, to amend the comprehensive plan in that area. I mean, that's significant.
Not to mention listening to the McLaughlin neighborhood talk about parking on High Street and Center Street.
We've got to start putting faces to these issues. We're not just dealing with land. We're dealing with people and businesses and investment, stuff like that. And so the unintended consequences of this Riverwalk are now beginning to surface a little bit. And maybe down the road, sure, I understand that. But also, people that are looking to make investment in Oregon City are going to have to wonder or consider whether or not my property is going to be used for commercial purposes, industrial purposes, or a parking lot. you know, and those things have to be discussed. So, you know, you might want to consider that. You know, where do we go from here? What are the off-site effects of this Riverwalk going to be? Because you can bet your public dollar that public dollars are going to be included. So just a sort of a friendly word of warning, I guess.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, we'll be talking, you know, with these meetings, we're going to also meet individually with downtown business owners and property owners, with McLaughlin folks, with Kenema folks. You know, maybe one of the part of the solution is you need a permit program or parking, you know, permit management up on top of the hill when that pedestrian bridge goes in.
And ODOT, because traffic coming out of that tunnel, conflicting and competing with pedestrians crossing McLaughlin is going to be an issue for the state.
And people crossing Railroad Street there at the tunnel,
Well,
too.
we need to let Kelly move on with her presentation.
Thanks.
We're
Yeah.
losing a lot of time here.
And we did, we have worked with ODOT with the zone change that we did 2 years ago to rezone the site to mixed use. We identified some improvements with ODOT that would be made, and one of the improvements is that railroad intersection coming off of like right after the tunnel. So there's a project there that will be built. You'll have a way in on Main Street to drive into the site, and then also Water Street will be reintroduced. That's parallel to Main, kind of right when you're coming south on 99 and it starts to curve. You're turning into the current, it's a parking lot right now. That's going to be Water Street. So there'll be another way in there. That's looped into Main Street through Water to 4th to Main. So you can kind of go in a circle. So yeah, we're thinking about all those things. We're working with ODOT, and we look forward to talking to you more about the parking and access. So thanks for your comments on that. I'm just going to say a couple more things about the clarifier. We heard support for event space or this kind of prospect example, but one of the main things that people really liked is having a connector pathway to have a secondary connection out to the overlook. So we're going to try and provide that. And then for the overlook, we asked about look and feel, and all these images are on the survey, so you can go on and kind of check them out and choose your favorites as well. So we asked about the experience there. We have got some great input and great comments. And the full results of the survey are posted on our website if you want to check those out. And then we'll take another round of results once we close the survey in 3 days. And then our calendar, I want to share a schedule with you. This is a little bit adjusted now. So it says Winter 17 is the next public event. That's actually going to be in June. So in June, we'll have our preferred Riverwalk design. We'll let you know when that is, because it's going to be a really nice event, and we hope to be able to share a lot of information with you then. And then after we have that preferred design, then we'll really get cracking on that phase 1, getting the permits, getting the engineering drawings, construction drawings done, and then starting construction. And we hope to start construction in mid-2018. So hopefully you'll see equipment out there and shovels and things coming down in 2018, and then that construction, because of all the different permits that we need to get and the time that it takes and the amount of concrete that is out there that needs to be removed, it's likely going to be 3, maybe even 4 years of a construction process for that phase 1. So with that, I'm finished. And any more questions?
Let's start the questions from the right-hand side and go right on through.
So you're going to talk about phasing this, and you have $20,000 for the first phase, which is about 1/3 of the total project cost. Are you going to be able to phase the privately owned property in some way without defining that and phase the parking. So perhaps if you tore down some current buildings that aren't proposed to be saved, that could be surface parking for the short term, something that, get that all coordinated.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah, we're looking at that. Maybe providing surface parking in an area, and then that eventually becomes where you build your parking garage later on. Yeah.
Whatever, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Real quick, before we go on to the next question. So we have to start our next meeting at 7:30 promptly. Okay. We knew we were going to go long, so we got some pizza in the back for you. So we probably want to give ourselves at least 5 to 10 minutes to inhale. And then, so just keep that in mind as you guys go through this. We can skip out on the last item. It's just Public Works update. So be happy to pass.
Questions?
I have a couple of questions. So first, what do you guys anticipate in terms of the, like daily visits, like what traffic flows are going to be like? How many people are going to be coming here?
Well, it's not easy to predict that, especially with, if we're building phase 1, and then, what are we talking about for phase 1 versus all of it? We have looked at similar, other destinations in the state, like the Vista House in the Gorge, and different other parks and museums and things like that. And so we're trying to kind of predict what kind of foot traffic we might see. One thing we do know is that when people visit, it's going to be mostly on the weekends or in the evenings, and not during rush hour when people are trying to get to and from work. So that helps, at least the traffic situation. But we're going to we know that we're going to provide parking as part of phase 1, as much as we can. And so we can't, with a park, with many parks, you can't predict how many people are going to come and use it. But that's one of the reasons that we're creating this transportation demand management plan and parking plan with our consultants this spring, is to kind of figure out how we use data and collect that data over time so that we can make sure we're meeting, we set standards for ourselves to meet, and then we meet those because we measure those things over time. So I know that's really vague, but we'll be getting into more of those details as we get into that transportation demand management plan.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like when you look at some of those, like even when you drive through the gorge and you look at Vista House, it's packed. And if that's how Oregon City is going to turn into, it's going to be, it's going to be really tough for people that are used to, going down there and doing things on weekends and evenings. I mean, the city is already kind of that area is already getting active, and then it's going to get even more active. I mean, it's kind of good, but it's like it needs to be really well taught.
Has there been given any thought to flushing the lagoon? That gets pretty nasty in the summer.
Yeah, there are invasive plants in there that will be cleared out. And PGE sometimes can work on that, but we'll be doing that as part of all of the habitat work as well. Yeah.
And then I guess this goes without saying, everything on that river walk will be flood-proof, right? And then I'd like to have you consider in your budget the purchase of a shuttle bus. Maybe that'll come into your transportation end of it, but ideally between the site and the end of the Oregon Trail Interpretive Center, there's a lot of parking down there.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all I have.
Thanks.
Gee, we sold 2 of them a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
I'll pass.
I was wondering about, I gather that the part of the Riverwalk will be constructed before any of the redevelopment on the private property occurs. Have you thought about, if the Riverwalk is constructed, then the redevelopment occurs, that there'll be a lot of construction activity for redevelopment, and you might have to close parts of the Riverwalk for periods of time because just for safety.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's true. And even if the Riverwalk's phased, then we might have to close a portion of the Riverwalk to build another portion of the Riverwalk. So it's going to that could happen on either end. But the Riverwalk construction is going to be mostly along the shoreline, and the private side is mostly, you know, on the other side of Main Street. So hopefully it won't conflict too much.
One question on public facilities for bathroom activities. I didn't hear any in that presentation. What accommodations are you making there?
Mm-hmm. The building that's on the corner, the admin building down there, in phase 1, we might just use the restrooms that are in that building so that we can afford to build more of the pathway. And then in the full build out, we were looking at one of the historic buildings to hold kind of anything that we need for, you know, a visitor center or for restrooms, for storage, for, you know, interpretive kiosks or whatever you have. Mill O is potentially one of the buildings that could be housed in, and that's actually adjacent to the yard, so it's a nice centrally located area.
One last question. You know, throughout this whole review of the Blue Heron site, it's more or less been concerned about the historic preservation of the site. Are there going to be any icons and statues and things along the Riverwalk of a public nature?
Absolutely, yeah. We have actually a group meeting tomorrow, a focus group on the interpretive plan, and figure out how are we going to tell all those stories, all the history, and so we want to do more than just signs. There will be signs, of course, you can read about the history, but we want to do more than that, so we're trying to figure out what that is, what sort of unique experiences can we have out there.
Can I piggyback on that? So Bonneville Dam, it has some interactive things that keep youth interested, and if you can have seasonal kiosks that show what type of fish are migrating, even if you don't see the actual fish, but there may be some ideas there on Bonneville Dam.
Thanks. Yeah.
Also, the Forest Service has different areas that you can call a certain phone number and it'll give you an oral narrative of the site that you're at. That's kind of interesting.
You mean like the ones we got around the museums over there by the library?
I'm not familiar with those.
Irvington House has one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And State Parks has something they call a ghost building, which is basically a wire frame, which would be work if you wanted to use a multi-use area or something and keep the old shape but do something different.
Bob, can I say one thing? I'd hate to miss an opportunity here to give Kelly a public comment on this facility. So I know you guys are talking about maintenance. Mm-hmm. There's also, you know, so like the elevator, it's a similar kind of a facility in the sense that it manages a lot of people. It's one of those facilities that attracts a lot of tourism. And so, you know, just to operate the museum, I think we're around $120,000 a year to operate the museum. The elevator. Sorry, the elevator.
That too.
Yeah, museums are different, but the elevator. And today we were talking about our budget a little bit, and you know, things like replacements of key elements. Obviously, this got a design life to it, you know. But I'm just thinking of a $60 million project that maybe it's, you know, because of the harsh environment it is, I don't know what that life will be, but how does the project team think about replacement value for that? Because even if we do it in, you know, deck panels or, I imagine some of those components are going to be built such that it would have a very, very long life, but others maybe not so much. So, for instance, the elevator, we were talking about the windows in the elevator, observation deck. I think you gave me a number about $250,000 to upgrade those. You know, we painted it not too long ago. That was a pretty big price tag too. So I hope that the project team is thinking beyond just day-to-day maintenance and thinking about replacement values.
Thanks.
So,
Yeah.
Okay, let's take a break until promptly at 7:30, and at that time, Henry will be in charge. I'm not saying in control, but in charge.
I am pleased you made that difference.
Kelly, good.